Everyone, welcome and thank you for tuning in to the Fizz. I'm delighted to be sat here in conversation with Gu, the head of data engineering at Group 1001. Gu, welcome.
Thank you, Koen. Glad to be here.
Uh, let's start with getting to know you, Gu. What does the audience need to know about you?
So I guess the most interesting about me is that I'm just a kid that was fortunate enough to come to the States. I was born and raised in the Caribbean, in Belize, and somehow wound up in one of the hottest industries in the past, God knows how long, where I'm at this table sitting right now here talking about how we can drive innovation with data analytics across the board. So extremely lucky. And I specialize and made my entire career out of data engineering. Was really specialized around the modern data stack to really bring and foster this ecosystem and this innovation and really bring a lot more ideas to the table on that front. So been really fortunate here.
We're here in Austin, Texas. What does the audience need to know about this eclectic city known for music, tech, good food?
I think the most interesting thing about Austin, besides the music scene, is actually the barbecue scene.
Oh, excellent.
Nowhere out there in the country has anything remotely close. The barbecue here is amazing. I always tell people if you're coming to Austin, there's really three food groups. There's barbecue, tacos, and beer.
I love it. I'm gonna have to try that. Let's talk a bit about Group 1001. What's the company about? What's the mission statement and so on?
So Group 1001 it's a pretty recent company, but it came out at a very interesting point. So who we are, Group 1001, we're an insurance company, and really what we are, we're like this umbrella company of several different insurance companies under that we've acquired over time. And the most interesting thing about the journey of this organization is that our CEO and founder, Dan Towers, he really focuses on like the acquisition side of the fence of acquiring other companies into the Group 1001 family. But it's not the what you would traditionally think about acquisitions in the fact that a lot of companies just do M&As and acquire, but not
Right.
really integrate them. But Dan's mission has always been look for businesses out there that are having issues. Let's bring them into the umbrella of Group 1001. Let's invest in that company and let's revitalize the business from there on. And he's done it with all the different companies that he's acquired and really has grown Group 1001 to where it is right now. And what's interesting about that is that in order to do that, it's also part of the culture. So the culture of the organization is that we're a very tech forward organization, and we use technology to drive a lot of that within our organization. So we drive on innovation from a culture standpoint. We really value a lot more in terms of autonomy within our organization. So when they brought me on, I was given a lot of the freedoms in order to innovate and to really bring best of breed services and capabilities within the organization because of that culture, because of what Group 1001 means. So combining the tech forward nature of it with the autonomy that they allow you to build forward on that one, while at the same time with the focus of investing in people with companies and the resources to really foster that innovation through the organization. That's really what Group 1001 means.
Brilliant, brilliant. Could you tell us a bit about the history of data and the importance of it for the group?
When I first joined at Group 1001, it was about a year ago. The way data analytics was being done when I joined in, the maturity curve wasn't good. The way I would tell the story is when I first joined, there was so many challenges, so many problems, a lot of issues, whether it be cycle failures, having issues on that end. And more importantly, what I saw besides like just processes, I saw fundamentally that data wasn't really being used in a way that could really drive the decision making process, even though it was involved. It just was very cumbersome. They were really reliant on seeing rows and columns within the reports. That was the way of the data culture within the organization. Fast forward to where it is now today, it's a drastically different story whereby we're looking whenever there's an issue, whether it be trying to answer a question of how do we drive operational efficiency within our servicing teams, we can actually take that idea, that question that we had, and provide an insight in under 2 days. And that's the innovation that we've built about, we brought about within this organization.
Yeah, nice. Can you tell a bit about the structure of the data team at the group?
So within Group 1001, as I mentioned, we're kind of this umbrella insurance company of different brands. In actuality, there are different companies that we brought through this acquisition. From that perspective, so I work under the overarching company from that perspective, Group 1001, the umbrella side. Within our data team, I could tell you that we have a total of 5 people
Mm.
within our data team. But we interact primarily with our core policy management data sets, really the heart of our business in the annuity space in here. And what we also work with is, after we built this, is we're also interacting with the rest of the different data teams around the organization to drive change and use the toolings, the platform capabilities to unlock them and enable them forward.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Can you share a couple of the biggest business drivers that you started with first?
Yeah, sure thing. So one of the biggest drivers initially was not necessarily from a business perspective. There were a lot of technical issues. So the biggest impact I could tell you when I first joined was the fact that many a times one of my biggest nightmares, and the thing that I always tell everyone is, it's much better to be consistently wrong than inconsistently right. And when I say inconsistently right, imagine a situation whereby you wake up one morning and you're looking at this dashboard and you're making a decision on it, but then you realize afterwards that it was only 75% complete.
All right.
Imagine that there's 25% gap in the data. So imagine you look at revenues, imagine if you're looking at the balances, imagine you're looking at policies, and you're only seeing a quarter of it is missing. But sometimes you may not even be able to tell that something is wrong, and you end up making a business decision on it. So incomplete data is my worst nightmare. And that's what we started off with initially. So from a business perspective, a lot of times there were a lot of reports and dashboards that were provided that had incomplete data sets. A lot of times they were just missing data. And more often than not, there were a lot of data sets that were just delayed from that regard.
Mhm.
So the business driver for us coming into this organization is, how do we take this current situation that is, we know is broken, we don't want this. How do we take that and use this opportunity with kind of my experience and background to fundamentally rebuild this from scratch, to get much better quality of data sets, to get the highest quality of data, to provide the data sets in a manner that is not taking 24 hours later to
Yeah.
get some sort of report, but to provide something that you can have your dashboard near real time, live as the data is coming through, and be able to report on it. And to not only that, to fundamentally change an organization to become data centric, to make this data centric decision making within the organization. That was the opportunity that we had when I first joined within the organization. That's what we've been building upon our journey. So the business driver is really fixing the issues, driving more revenue outcomes. And what I've seen within the past month is that the organization just has this immense desire of getting more data. And it's not just more of the same data, but more disparate components of data. So now that we have our visibility on our overall policies and administration of it, we can now tie in other data sources like our marketing data sources. So you can see from the actual lead to sales conversion funnel, get that kind of insight there. And also, as well as we can now tie in with more of our operations data to see how many tickets and supports items have our customers have been issuing and creating upon our policy. So we can know when we're going into that discussion with the customer, how do we best service them? How do we best engage with them? And just, it's all about delighting the customer. And at the same time, from my perspective as in a data team, how do we delight our users using data?
Yeah. Wow, brilliant. Super insightful. Um, I know people have this question because there's so much to start with, right? Thinking back of the roadmap that you went through, what were some of the key milestones that you achieved, and can you share anything on that?
One of the key milestone that I found quite funny initially, I wouldn't call it a milestone, but one of the key things that was interesting is when I first joined an organization. Like 2 weeks later, I was the only person left in the data team. Like,
Right.
I had to take over this entire process. I had to learn it from scratch. I had to dig in. And what I always tell people too is that the best way to learn something is when it breaks. Because when it breaks, you have to go in and fix it. You have to know the nuts and bolts. You have to know exactly how things work. And I kid you not, within the first 2 weeks, everything was breaking, and I was just going in and trying to understand what was happening. And on top of that, I had someone that was initially within the team and ended up leaving. So what this person was doing every morning was waking up at 6 a.m. in the morning because to run a set of data quality checks every morning. And because he was no longer there, and I was the sole person
You had to wake
holding the
up at
fort,
6
I
a.m.
had to wake up at 6 a.m. every morning. And
Yeah.
and if anyone knows me, I am not a morning person. I don't mind working until 2 a.m. in the night, but I cannot for the life of me wake up at before 7 o'clock in the morning. It's very
Right.
difficult.
Yeah.
So I had to wake up 6 a.m. in the morning, running these series of different checks to ensure that, like I said, a lot of times you just didn't know if the data was there. So we were just checking for some of the most basic things there, just to see if the data was present. So before we could actually, run our reports and tell the business or inform them when something happens. So that way they know that, hey, something's happened. Don't use it. We're going to go in and fix it. 3 days later, because I really hate waking up 6 o'clock in the morning, we use actually Soda, using the open source version, roll it out into production, and now automatically it's already automating all of the checks that we're running, and at the same time stopping even like our report refreshes, so none of the business ever gets impacted. And because now we have that check in place, I can now sleep, which means I can now focus on other
That's
aspects of it.
value right there. That's pretty clear if you ask me. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. So Gu, no more getting up at 6 a.m. That's a win. Tell us about the other milestones.
I think the other core milestone for us that was interesting is one of the I see it more of a technical milestone right now. So I believe about a month and a half in, we were able to went through a POC, evaluating, understanding the full architecture, the full implementation, the scope of what we had to build. Within a month and a half, we were able to undergo an evaluation and select the Snowflake as our core data platform. Fast forward 4 months later, I think if I recall, right before the day before Christmas, we rolled this into production. In less than like 6 months of landing here in this organization, we were able to not only select Snowflake, we migrated all of our data sets, all of our underlying ETL processes, loading in from Postgres over to Snowflake, migrated all of our 200 plus different Power BI reports are now at that point pointing to Snowflake using this core data platform. And we're able to use it in a combination of Snowflake as our core data platform, still using Airflow at the time. And we actually leveraged Soda in order to help us do a lot of the reconciliation during that migration. And the reason why we were able to be so successful is because we were able to use Soda in between to actually ensure that the quality of data was good,
Right.
as we're just ironing it out over the course of a few weeks before rolling into production. And that milestone to me really was really interesting in the fact that when a migration is done really well, no one really knows something happened,
Yeah.
because in the end, it's just transparent. It just works as expected, and that was like a huge milestone for us from that perspective. And then going into the new year, I think another big milestone was the fact that we're able to migrate off of Airflow into Dagster, and now we're able to get even more velocity from our development productivity. And now we're undergoing like the next phase of it, of just fundamentally redefining the end-to-end reporting and analytics experience within our organization.
Wow, brilliant. Fast and yeah, that's awesome. I want to pivot a bit to Soda. You brought Soda in first open source at Group 2001. Can you describe a bit about why you brought it in? You touched on the challenges, but maybe specifically around the data quality checks that were in place, and how you then moved to the full platform of Soda. That will be insightful to know as well.
So like I said, my story with bringing in Soda was the fact that I had to wake up 6 a.m. in the morning. And there's one thing about me, I would we have to automate that away. So that's why we brought in Soda open source
Right.
to use it. And once we started using the open source tool, I saw that the tooling had a lot more. So I started investigating more of like, what does the cloud offering does, and the fact that it has a user interface. You can actually have the agent model. I reached out with your product team to understand what are the roadmap, what are the things you guys are building. From my perspective, what I like to evaluate for any sort of product is to understand where is it at now, and how is the team thinking of where their product vision and their roadmap's going to align from an execution standpoint. Where are they going to be tomorrow, and how quickly can they execute from that, and how well do they execute onto that vision? So And also in my own personal experience, I've actually built this data quality process in
Right.
the past. So when I first started and I saw the challenge we had of like, well, geez, this like running these queries every day. Well, I could just build a very quick wrapper on top of this and just schedule it and run every day. But what if I don't have to do that again? Because I remember building an end-to-end data quality process. You have to monitor the checks. You have to support a wide variety of different options on top of it. And if you really want to scale it for enterprise, you need to kind of make standardized templated forms of that check, whether it be the uniqueness or freshness or doing the reference checks across the board. And even if you're doing standard deviation or other statistical checks, you have to build those templates so you can scale it for the organization. So not everyone is writing their own custom SQL all the darn time. On top of that, once an issue fail, what are their learning mechanism? How do you respond to it? How do you track it? The entire incident management protocol of handling that. I built that before. I do not want to build it again.
Right.
That will take a lot of engineering effort to do so, and it will take time. So that's when I evaluated Soda and looked at the cloud offering, I saw, well, wow, it had all these capabilities already built in. And I looked at the libraries in terms of what the different checks that it supports. I looked at the customization and flexibility of it. And I just look at the fact that, well, I don't have to really build this. It's already there.
Mm.
So that's what drove us to move forward, to go from transitioning from open source to the actual cloud offering, the paid offering. And what I saw within the organization is with Soda Cloud, it becomes something whereby we can move. I guess I don't know what the right term is, but it's like down the stack. We don't have to have a highly technical user authoring check. You can have a business analyst, you can have a
Right.
data analyst write the checks, author them, and provision it on their own via self-service. And that's what I really liked about the Soda Cloud offering. So I saw a much bigger vision of how we can enable this for the organization. And that's how we're using Soda from that perspective.
Tell us a bit about how much of the data in your stack is now under coverage by Soda and how much is still left to do.
From a total data perspective, I think the interesting thing about that is I have an opinion in this one, and it might be controversial. Well, I'm of the opinion that you shouldn't have so when you're writing code, there's always a concept of like you want 100% test coverage. I don't believe you should do that for data.
Right.
And here's my reason why. The average rate of growth of data in the entire industry-wide, from like the 1970s until now, has always been 2x every 2 years. Data volume grows 2 times every 2 years. Are your data quality checks going to also grow 2 times every two years?
Yeah.
I don't think so. But if you think about that problem of that scale, that exponential growth of data, can you really keep up with that? And chances are we're not going to be able to keep up with it. So I'm of the opinion that you shouldn't have a massive test coverage across it. You need to identify what is the most critical data assets within your organization, the most critical components that you need to make sure that you cannot have these failing. These are, you have to make sure these are of good quality every single day. That's how we focus on. We focus on the 100% test coverage of our most critical data assets. And as we're onboarding new data sets, as we're refining the process, pass from the exploratory phase of understanding what this data is, creating some initial models, to productionizing this model, to creating data quality rules on top of it. That's where we're going through that iteration. So our focus on the test coverage is really on only the most critical data assets when we need at that point. Not usually too much earlier on, but more so at the tail end to ensure that we have good test coverage and we can trust that the data that we're providing is good.
Yeah, what you just said reminds me of data cataloging, data governance. I installed or implemented data catalog solutions for 10 years, and organizations would try to put all their metadata in one go, or that would be their sole focus, to put as much metadata in the catalog. But they ended up with so much metadata and little value. And by the time they were done with one source system, there would be already another one switched on, and there was no value. It reminds me of the similarities with data quality.
Interesting thing you brought that up. I've been thinking about that a bit. The thing with data quality products, and I'm sure you could attest to this, is it's very hard to sell data quality tooling to an organization. Here's the reason why. How do you calculate the ROI of that?
Right.
It's a very difficult challenge because, well, in an ideal world, there are no quality challenges, so there is no ROI to achieve on this. And if there are data quality issues, how do you measure that? So the way I always think about this has never been about like how many checks are we providing. That's not the measure of success. like it's a measure of success of how many times of instances do we have issues, and how many times are we still having those type of data issues going forward. Having an initial issue one time and ensuring that never happens again is
Right.
much more vital and important. And from a macro level view, the way I see soda and how it actually helps us transform and the value we get is the fact that we could sleep at night knowing
Right.
that
Yeah.
our processes are running, that we could trust that if everything's finished and the cycle's complete and we could see the data now in our dashboard refresh, we can trust it. You know why? Because we have these checks in place. That's the value from that regard. The fact that no one's waking up early in the morning having no clue of where we at in terms of the data. Can we trust it? Can we use it? Are we done? Having that visibility, having that knowing and understanding that I can use the data and we're safe, and even building these proactive alerts. Data quality is really about moving from being reactive to issues, meaning
Mhm.
that every day you're firefighting and trying to troubleshoot these issues as they're coming through to the point whereby I know what's everything that's happening in this space. I know what the challenges are. If there are issues that are happening, I could tell you and our business counterparts to like say, hey, we know there's a problem with this cycle. We are addressing it. Give us a few hours and we'll get recovered pretty quickly. That's the value. So real ROI is overall has always been the productivity of our engineers, the productivity of our analysts, to not spend time troubleshooting and firefighting every day, to spend more time on discovering new insights and delivering more value.
Exactly. Right.
That's
Right.
the
Yeah.
ROI.
Yeah.
But how do you measure that and how do you sell it? That's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Gu, tell us a bit how soda is used at the moment at Group 1001.
So we're right now at the part of our journey right now in the organization where we're using soda to actually drive additional self-service data quality capabilities within our organization. Initially, we use it as part of like our data migration onto Snowflake. That was a huge capability that we actually leveraged. That was very vital for us to, as we're onboarding onto Snowflake, we saw that we can actually directly reconcile the data sets as they're being loaded between our Postgres instance and Snowflake. So we can know that we are having exactly the same quality of data between both environments. That's one of the main contributors of why we're able to successfully migrate so seamlessly. In the self-service part of that journey, where we're at is we saw that there are so many different issues that come about. And they're interesting in the fact that a lot of times we depend on a lot of vendor file feeds coming in. We depend on different market data and rates of those nature. And funnily enough, sometimes some of these come at a 2-day lag, some come at 1-day lag. And every now and then these files just break. They just
Right.
don't process. So we actually very quickly spun this up whereby we enable one of our core QA folks onto it. She was able to self-service and write her data quality rule. Jen, she was the one that wrote it out there. Just enable us to really quickly check these different rates and the different market data that's coming through. That allows us to now, like I said, these issues that come through. It doesn't matter about whether they happen the first time. What matters is that never happen again, or at the very least, we'll know it happens. Because what is unacceptable, which is what happened before, is that for almost a week we were missing data from the vendor. They
Mhm.
didn't send it, so for a week's time we didn't have that information. That's just unacceptable.
Yeah.
So now we have these processes in place. If we identify a problem, we would just using Soda Cloud, we can very quickly author a data quality rule, deploy it, and now we have something that's monitoring, that's alerting it. We know we can trust the data that we have. Another aspect of it that we use is one of our core development team was actually fundamentally refactoring a massive data processing workload on our system to really process our transactions and reconcile them overnight. There's a fundamental rewrite of that process. So as a result, we use Soda Cloud to roll up a bunch of these data quality rules to check this is what we expect out of the transaction data, and we roll that into production. And lo and behold, as we're testing and rolling out this brand new rewrite of this process, every day we're checking it in our low environments, and when it rolls in production, we have continuous checks on it going forward. So we're using it as ways of ensuring that errors that have occurred before never occur again, or we
Mhm.
will know that it occurs, so we can very quickly react. We can very quickly reach out to vendors and recover. So speed of recovery is dramatically improve. We're using it as a way of doing regression testing of our environments, such that going forward, if these major changes, we know how we can actually regression test this data going forward, and just building these unit tests that don't exist. That's how we're expanding coverage. And like I said, not all data is created equal. That it's only the critical data sets that we're going to build these on. It's only when we need these that we're enabling it. But now we have the tooling, and we're rolling it across our organization to enable that flexibility, enable those outcomes.
Oh, yeah. Amazing, amazing. We've discussed Soda at length. Let's zoom out and look at the whole stack. What does it all mean for you?
What it all means for us is that in a combination of this entire modern data stack, I think what it really meant is forget all these toolings. Forget all these, like whether it be Snowflake or Dagster or Soda, whatever, forget all of it. When it finally clicked to me was really about, I think about a month ago, our management came down and asked us, there's a huge mandate within our organization. Hey, we want to be able to scale our organization more. We see that there's a huge influx of different annuities policies are coming in. How can our operations team keep up with that volume to be able to handle that? So optimizing the performance of our operations team so they can better service customers and handle the uptick of volume of the business coming through, that was very key. But how do we optimize that productivity? That's where we sat down with one of their key business counterparts and really kind of flesh out this process. Let's understand this use case. Let's understand the end-to-end process that's happening here, from receiving a policy to issuing it. Let's map out where the data points are, the different stages. And lo and behold, like from the initial, when we first started coming down with that initial that initial request to creating a dashboard and rolling into production so we have visibility into this, it took 2 days. 2 days from initial ask to fulfillment. And this is combining data that doesn't exist before.
Right.
We're pulling in Zendesk data, we're pulling in our own policy management data, creating this view and this model that can allow you to see the different stages, the average time, the median time for each stage to fulfill, and where we bottleneck.
Yep.
And that's what's key. We were able in 2 days' time deliver visibility that didn't exist.
Yep.
That's the reason why these tools exist. That's the reason why the modern data stack exists. Is when you have an idea and go to insight, it doesn't take you months.
Yep.
These type of projects that you've seen, they take months, and by 3 months later, the business is ready. It's over.
Course, yeah.
Whatever we're worried about, we already dealt with it.
Yeah.
But here, you can actually react to these challenges live using data, and within 2 days' time to be able to create something, and now we have visibility.
So it means to me that what you built, make sure the business is ready to scale and pivots in case things needs to be pivoted.
Exactly. And that's the interesting thing, is that how do we take an organization that wasn't data centric to become data centric, to use data to inform them of the decision making process, to use data to drive the decision making process, not just through gut feeling, but to see clearly where are we having gaps, using data to explain that.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing this. That's why this modern data stack exists. Seeing that outcome was when the light bulbs clicked in for me.
Right. Yeah, amazing. That's some serious ROI. I want to pivot for a bit to the modern data stack. I know you're a big champion of the modern data stack. I want to combine it as well with something that you've mentioned and we hear often, which is it's often a very small team, the data engineering team. So how important is it to pick the right modern data stack, as there are different tools, and what can you share around like how important it is, and any tips you can share there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a challenge, but also a huge opportunity. And here's why. The modern data stack, in my opinion, I mean, in my own career, I've seen kind of like 3 different evolutions of data analytics right now. We're in this latest one, what I call the modern data stack, this cloud data warehouse modern data stack evolution. And it's great because what's great about it is the fact that you have tons of best of breed services and tooling in the space. So if you ever look at that mad diagram of like the entire data analytics ecosystem, it's like what, hundreds and hundreds of different application and tools and different products to pick from. But the problem is, how do you know what to pick? Mm-hmm. How do you know what to choose? How to fit in? So I think that's we need to be able to prescribe more, is that what's the right stack for you? And for us, where our organization really lived is that initially comes from this Azure SQL Server SQL Server, SSIS type environment. And for us, well, in our organization, we use like Airflow with Postgres. So to go into, we needed Snowflake as our relational database for our core data platform to store and transform our data that's highly scalable. We use Fivetran for replicating data from our, whether it be our relational database systems as sources, whether it be our SaaS applications, like it could be in the form of like Salesforce, Gu Analytics, Zendesk, and the different data sources from that perspective. We use Coalesce for our data transformation suite. We use Dagster to orchestrate end-to-end of coordinating all these different execution activities, from triggering and scheduling to running these transformation processes to running data quality checks via Soda, as well as we have Atlan for our overall visibility and discoverability of our overall data assets within the organization. So that's like our version of like the modern data stack to really bring all of this in place. What's to your point of like the question earlier on what it's mean to have a small data team? We're a data team of like 5 people total, including myself. And we're able to build this out as a result without having a team of engineers to set up and provision Hadoop clusters. You don't need a team of engineers to build from scratch data quality processes. Like we built the DQA a data quality process in the past from scratch, but by using these tools like what Soda's done, we don't have to go ahead and build it. We can just use Soda right off the bat, integrate it, plug and play, and at that point you can actually have your modern data stack up and running in a much shorter time span with a much smaller team. And I think the reason why you do all of this is the whole fact that once you have this all in place, the developer velocity is incredible. What used to take months can now take weeks and days even to provide that insight in. And I think the nirvana state for me is that sitting in with the business and really understanding their business problems as engineers, but using our engineering mindset to be able to provide ways of solutioning that. But you generally don't see that in enterprise. In enterprise, you have a very, very specific task that an engineering team is doing, but they don't get to see the bigger picture. In startups, you have to do that.
Yeah.
So it's creating this kind of startup-like innovation and kind of building things towards like outcome very quickly in an enterprise setting. But you use developer tooling to enable that.
Brilliant. I think you touched on a lot of it, but I'm still going to ask. There's often the want to start building oneself, which of course means maintaining as well. Any other reasons why an organization should adopt a modern data stack versus the big platforms that claim to do everything or build themselves?
You're talking about the question of do you bundle or unbundle the modern data stack? I think the reality, like from my own experience coming in from as an Informatica background, bundling was a lot of times in the past was sold to an enterprise. You have this entire bundle, it has all the tools that you need. But I think the reality where it breaks down is the fact that a large organization just simply can't innovate at that kind of pace to solve all of the problems in this space by a single organization. Even if you're an Amazon, yes, if you think about even like Amazon itself with AWS, yes, there are a lot of great services, but not all the services are equal and the same. Not all of them solve the problems to the point whereby it's the best solution for that particular problem space. And that's why I'm much more of a proponent of, like in the case of modern data stack, you kind of break it out by components, but it's modularized and you can integrate it. So you pick the best of breed solution that integrates well together. And what we're seeing in the innovation in the modern data stack space is they're really focused on the ecosystem. How do we integrate with all the additional partners in the space? Yeah. Like you with Soda, you're integrating with Databricks, with Snowflake, with Google BigQuery, and so forth. You want all these additional players you're integrating with because that is how you can actually be able to drive more options of your customer base. And that's how you can achieve product market fit. So all of these different startups are looking for that product market fit. And that's what matters to them. And if you think about it, if that's their only problem to solve, they will build one hell of a solution for that space. And that's why I'm much more of a proponent of having this unbundling, but you focus on the best of breed solution for that problem.
Fantastic, super insightful. Bit of a more personal question for you. You're very passionate about data. What can you tell us about being this catalyst for change within a large organization with data, right? Driving data for good, for better outcomes. What can you share around that?
I think for me, I've always wanted to drive more change within an organization. And it could be change within my team, it could be change within our department, it could be change holistic across the board. The reason why I'm so excited about data and using data analytics to drive change is that if you think about it, how many times a day as an organization, even within your own team, do you have to make a decision? And then if you ask the question, and if of the number of times you make a decision, how often do you actually use data to inform that decision? And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of us, we just don't use data day to day in our decision making process. But if you do, it's no more about going by gut feel. You're going in a manner that is really not only driving that decision making, but you're also building processes to make it measurable, to track where we are today, where we're going to be tomorrow, so we can actually drive that innovation and incrementally get there in the place we want to be. So I think to be a catalyst for change, you have to have a vision to know, where am I heading and how am I going to get there? But also, it's very important to know with data, where am I now?
Yeah,
So that's my overall opinion. Like, how do you become a catalyst for change using data? And that's what excites me about this kind of industry.
sweet, fantastic. What's next for data at the group 1001?
What's next is that we're really focused on completely redefining the entire end-to-end reporting analytics capability within organization. So I see it as part of it is reporting, part of it is the way we're presenting these visualizations. But one of the core things is, how do we create this unified view of the organization? How do we use this capability whereby we now have the data? How can we provide insights to the various groups within the organization, whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, whether you be in the upper management side of the fence? How do we use data to fundamentally change and optimize their own productivity across the organization stack? So it's really taking what we've built and scaling it across the organization, but at the same time have this holistic view of an entire organization's data.
Yeah,
That's what we're really driving for.
yeah.
And that fundamentally means we're going to be transforming the rest of the organization's analytics capabilities. So really making decision-making processes using data.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Speaking of organizational wide view, your catalog, I believe you brought in or you bring in Atlan, the Atlan catalog. Anything you can share there?
One of the most interesting things of what organization is, everyone has the same problem. As a data practitioner, you always have the same problem. Someone comes to you and say, "Hey, by the way, XYZ dashboard has this issue. What's going on?" And a lot of times, as a data practitioner, the way I would describe it, it's more of an archaeological exercise to go from what dashboard is it, where on the tile is it having issue, what column, what measure, drilling into what underlying data model is this coming from, what are all the different ETL processes that comprise this, to mapping it all the way back to the source systems that this data come from. That this lineage, this is to be honest, to find that information is an archaeological exercise. So the reason why we bring Atlan in is that as we're kind of rolling more and more of these out, we notice that there's a huge uptick of all these different requests and fulfilling them. So we brought in Atlan to help our team get better at this. And it's fundamental about, how do we manage data? So we brought in Atlan to help us create more better discoverability, to help get more lineage on top of all of these data assets. And because we're rebuilding it from scratch within this new platform, all of the services and tools are directly integrated within Atlan. So we don't have to spend months of engineering efforts to integrate to Atlan, as we've done with other cataloging solutions. It's right out of the box, very quick to integrate. So within like a less than a day's effort of integration, we had an unprecedented view of visibility to know that question, that dashboard, came from this view, which came from these ETL processes, these tables, and these ultimate data sources on the source system. We're able to map all of that out, and that is, for a data practitioner's gold, in the fact that now we know a full end-to-end visibility of how this data is constructed. But that's not why we really want this. And the real vision of what we see is that it's part of this effort of how do we really democratize data within an organization. We see Atlan is very critical to that asset, to that effort. So to democratize it, it means that we need to have a better handle of it. What data do we have in our organization? Who owns it? What does it mean for that data set? Like we can't just be talking about this view name or this table name. What does this data asset mean from an organization, from a business perspective? And more importantly, when you do eventually discover this data, who owns it? Like,
Yeah.
and also to know, can I trust this data? To know what quality rules have ran against it. When was the last refresh? When was the last loaded? Where is it being used and impacting? All of this is what I consider this entire data ops cycle view of handling our data management of our organization.
Yeah.
That's where our vision of why we brought in Atlan within our organization is to create that holistic view, because now we have a framework of how we can actually track it, trace it, and if there are issues from like a data quality standpoint that this particular table feed broke, it's creating duplicates or whatever, and it's failing the data quality rules, we can use Atlan to identify the impacted data assets all the way down to the dashboards that are being impacted there, alert the affected teams such that they can know that, hey, we're on top of it. So the same story like I mentioned earlier about soda, be from going from reactive to proactive. Now we're being proactive. We know there's an issue. We're informing you of it. We're resolving it. And by resolving it, we can also make sure that when we do fix the problem of that,
Mhm.
what the underlying process that created that issue, we can then apply another data quality rule to ensure once again that never happens again.
Yeah.
And that's how we could get better handle of our data sets. And now, because we're using this catalog solution to house all of the data assets within our organization, we can now share it between our different departments, between our different teams, between our different companies. So now we can truly democratize data within our organization.
Yeah. You mentioned lineage, traceability, super important. What other SODA data, metadata, do you think will augment really well your data catalog?
I think what'll be very interesting to see, number one, is that like the aggregation of all the checks within like a data asset. That's great. What I'd love to be able to see at some point, maybe there's something to be said. Like I said earlier, the only best way to handle data quality within organization is to target the most critical data assets. And
Yeah.
part of the reason for that, the major reason is due to resource and timing. So I think maybe there's something to be said whereby perhaps we can leverage generative AI to also identify, this data asset is very similar to this other data asset from this other source. So perhaps we can actually take the checks that are running here, apply it to the other one. So it allows you to very quickly provision it because we know it's just so similar from that regard. So the checks should be similar. And plus, if, maybe from an Atlan perspective, it can track metadata of the usage patterns, so it can inform Soda's, Copilot to let it know that perhaps this one is a very highly used asset that doesn't have enough test coverage. So to identify the critical assets within an organization, it's being used actively. So why can't we prescribe a check to it? So these are things that I can imagine, like Soda coming in to be able to help us from that regard, to really expand the coverage of quality rules within organization, to be even more self-service from that regard, so that way we can scale these different checks across the board, and at the same time overall just get better handle on data.
Snowflake is the data cloud of choice for Group 2001. Can you talk a bit about integrating Soda on top of Snowflake, the value proposition, and so on?
Snowflake was really the core choice for us going forward. It made a lot of sense from our perspective, and from the value proposition of integrating it to Soda. Well, I mean, Soda has a direct integration with Snowflake first and foremost, so it's really easy to just start up, spin up Soda from even the open source version of
Yeah.
it, and then get up and running. So I think the value proposition from us is, like I said, we didn't have to build this from scratch. We can just very quickly roll out data quality check in under just a few days. So like I said, like the story earlier is, I didn't have to wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning anymore. Just 3 days later, rolled out into production. We're having Soda checking against our Snowflake environment. But I think the biggest value prop for us was really on when we were doing the data migration, in the fact that we can actually very quickly spun up the reconciliation and doing the quality checks on both sides of the fence because it's programmatic using the Soda CL from that regard. We can run the same quality checks on both Postgres and Snowflake as we're migrating, and even do recon checks of the counts of between the two environments, and that allows us to have that trust to know that our data is being loaded appropriately, and then, like I said, we're able to quickly transition and migrate over to Snowflake without a hitch, and that's one of the biggest value proposition of what that integration means for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Real quick on Coalesce is also a tool you use. Can you explain a bit to the viewers and listeners where does Coalesce end and Soda start?
Sure thing, sure thing. So for a lot of people who don't know about Coalesce, it's a data transformation tool. So in this modern data stack space, most people are familiar with DBT, and I have used DBT quite a lot in my past role. The challenge I saw with DBT that Coalesce fixed and really solved on was the fact that for a lot of organizations, to train an organization for whereby the vast majority of your team are more, I would say, ETL developers from that regard. They're used to Informatica. They're used to GUI based tools. They're used to like SSIS. They want that look and feel to be able to build the pipelines. To train them onto DBT is quite a daunting task, to be able to onboard them, to train them, to teach them all the different things so they can start using it. It's a huge lift to get there. Once they do get there, some people will be able to be productive, but a lot of folks is a daunting task to transition. So that's why we chose Coalesce for it, because it has not only the GUI to be able to build our pipelines on. We see ourselves as a very small data team, and we plan to keep it small, and so we value having more productivity within the engineers, so they can be 10 times or 20 times more productive with it. So as an engineer with Coalesce, we can very quickly build these data models 10 or 20 times faster than with DBT, which allows us to have that scale. But in terms of how it integrates to Soda, what Coalesce does really well is creating the data models, creating the transformations, using all the different audits and templates that they've already built into the framework. But what Coalesce is not really good at is really on the data quality side of the fence. So this is where Soda really comes in really well in that front, and the fact that we build all of our data quality checks and rules within Soda. It's all within YAML. We can run our data models and build it within Coalesce. So then with Coalesce and Soda, we can have that tight integration, and all of that could be integrated and published into Atlas, so you can actually have that holistic view across the board.
Fantastic. Super, super insightful. As we wrap up, a couple more questions. Any insight you can share on some big trends, movements that you see in the data space?
I think what's the most interesting trend in the data space right now, the one that's most undeniable right now, is the generative AI conversation. And the interesting thing that I'm seeing is the fact that organizations are afraid. And a lot of these enterprises are afraid of their data being leaked. And granted, right now, with all the different attacks that are happening within from cyber attacks and so forth, I totally understand it and I get it. But this fear of the unknown, and this fear of this new technology that they cannot understand or know how to embrace, to just toss it aside and prevent your organization from really leveraging it, is really unfortunate. Because if I tell my team this a lot, is that over the number of decades, like if you think over the past decade in terms of data analytics, if you look at the innovation that's happened, there's like 3 different life cycles, like in lifetimes in data we've seen over the past 10 years. If you think about it, like, can you imagine like the people who have went through and lived through this? That's why I tell my team that you have to embrace change. That's the only thing that's constant. So rather than pushing generative AI and blocking your organization from leveraging it, you should be part of the table, to sit down with them, to talk about it, to find ways of leveraging it, because these technologies are, quite frankly, amazing. They're truly transformative if you use it in an organization, and you should embrace these innovations in the space. Use it to help drive productivity within your department, within your team, within your organization, and use it as a way to really outcompete and out-innovate your competitor.
Yeah. Last question. If you could do anything with data, what would you do?
I don't know how to answer that question. I think the challenge with that one is that there's just too many things to do with data.
Mm.
So my pragmatic side of me says there's too many things to do with data. We need to find out what's the most impactful thing that we can solve, what's the most immediate outcome that we can deliver, and create that first iteration. Because taking that very first step of having an answer and creating an insight that can fulfill that answer, that's the very first leap that you have to take.
Mhm.
And that corrals a tremendous of activity within an organization to make that happen. So I don't have a direct answer to that, but I would say for anyone looking into this, and what can you do with an organization, is just taking that very first step.
Fantastic. Gu, I can't thank you enough. I've immensely enjoyed the conversation. The biggest takeaway for me is your ability and your wisdom around being able to zoom out from each individual tool and look at the whole holistically, the whole stack, and think of the mission of the company, scale, flexibility, being able to pivot and seeing everything together. What does it all mean? Very insightful. I need to re-listen to the whole conversation again for me to check all the other points that you mentioned. Very insightful.
Thank you so much, Koen. It's really delightful to be here. I've been extremely fortunate to have been involved in the data analytics space, thinking back on this, and I'm just glad to be able to be here to provide my voice and to provide my story, and hopefully provide a framework for other people that can actually use in this space to make sense of this kind of this madness of this data analytics space, but really so that way they themselves who are listening in right now, that you can actually become a change agent within your organization. You can find ways of bringing and embracing innovation using data analytics.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening in, for viewing, and I hope to see you at the next episode of the Fizz.